The night was quiet in the forest near Ethan's cabin. He had lived alone there for years, away from cities, noise, and people. The only sound he usually heard was the wind through the trees or the soft crackle of his fireplace. But tonight, something was different. A loud boom shook the earth beneath his feet. It came from deep in the woods. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and ran outside. He saw a trail of smoke in the sky and followed it. The forest was dark, but the light from the fire ahead guided him. After 15 minutes of walking, he found it. A small escape pod had crashed into the ground, leaving a trail of broken trees and burning leaves. The metal was still glowing hot, steam rising from it. Ethan looked around, no sign of any rescue or response. He slowly stepped forward, his heart beating fast. He expected a soldier, maybe a robot, or even an animal, but what he found made him freeze in place. Inside the pod, lying still, was a little girl. She wasn't human. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing, and her hair was silver like moonlight. She looked around 6 years old, wearing strange clothes torn and dirty. Her big glowing eyes stared at Ethan in fear. She didn't speak, not a single word. She was trembling, too weak to move. Ethan gently reached into the pod, showing his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The girl didn't fight back. She let him lift her into his arms, her small body cold and shaking. Ethan wrapped her in his jacket and carried her back through the woods. He kept looking over his shoulder, feeling like someone or something was watching. Back at the cabin, Ethan cleaned her wounds and gave her food. She didn't eat much, just stared at the fireplace. Her eyes flicked to him once in a while, like she was trying to understand him. He tried asking her questions, but she stayed silent, so he gave her a name, Leary. It just came to him, and when he said it, she blinked. It was the first time she responded. The next day, Ethan contacted the authorities. He told them what he found, hoping someone would come and help. But after hours of silence, a message finally came back. "No record of this life form," it said. "No rescue mission issued." Then nothing else. Ethan knew what that meant. She was alone, abandoned, or worse, forgotten. He made a choice, one that would change both of their lives. He decided to raise her himself. Days turned into weeks. Leary started to trust him. Little by little, she didn't speak, but she followed him, learned from him, and listened carefully. Ethan taught her how to hold a spoon, how to brush her hair, how to smile. But strange things began happening. Lights in the cabin would flicker when Leary got scared. His old tools would float slightly when she was upset. The air sometimes felt heavy, like energy was building up. Still, Ethan wasn't afraid of her. One night, while he was reading a book near the fire, Leary walked up to him. She touched his arm, looked him in the eyes, and whispered something. "Ethan," she said, in a soft, shaking voice. It was the first word she ever spoke. Ethan froze, his eyes filled with tears. Not of fear, but of hope. She had spoken his name in that moment. Something changed between them. They weren't just a lost girl and a lonely man anymore. They were family, but outside, deep in the forest, something moved, hidden in the darkness. A shadow watched the cabin from afar, and it wasn't human. Part 2. Learning to be human. Leary sat at the kitchen table, her silver hair messy, and her eyes watching Ethan closely. It had been 3 weeks since the crash. She still didn't talk much, but she listened. Every word Ethan said, she remembered. Every movement, every smile, every small thing he did. Leary watched and learned. Ethan started giving her small tasks. "Brush your teeth," he'd say, and Leary would try, even if awkwardly. "Fold your blanket," and she would. Even if it wasn't perfect, she didn't need much sleep. Only 3 or 4 hours a night. The rest of the time she sat by the window, staring at the stars like she was waiting for something. Ethan installed an old learning tablet he had stored away. He uploaded basic math, language, and Earth history for kids. To his surprise, Leary learned fast, faster than any child he had seen. She didn't just read, she absorbed knowledge, like her mind was a machine. But Leary wasn't a machine. Sometimes she laughed at small things, like the cat videos Ethan showed her. Sometimes she cried quietly, especially at night, and sometimes she would look at herself in the mirror and touch her face, like she didn't recognize it. One evening, while Ethan was cleaning the dishes, the lights flickered again. It had happened before, but now the lights dimmed and then turned completely off. Ethan walked to the breaker box, muttering, "That's strange." Suddenly the radio crackled to life, though it hadn't worked in years. A voice whispered through the static, sharp, alien and cold. He couldn't understand the words, but Leary froze when she heard it. She ran to the radio and screamed, "Nitrogen monoxide," and in that second, the radio exploded into sparks. Ethan shielded her, pulling her away from the smoke. He looked into her eyes, filled with fear and something else, guilt. She shook her head and whispered, "They found me." Ethan didn't ask who they were, not yet. He put his arm around her, calming her. "You're safe here," he said. "No one's taking you." Later that night, Ethan went into the attic and unlocked an old trunk. Inside were pieces of alien tech from his past items he had taken after serving in the Galactic Defense Corps. He hadn't touched them in years, trying to leave that part of his life behind. But now he needed them. He installed a frequency jammer around the cabin, built makeshift imp shields, and added an energy field detector near the woods. He didn't know who was out there, but he knew they were coming. The next morning, Leary was silent again. She sat on the porch, drawing strange symbols in the dirt with her finger. They looked like stars, but also like letters, not human ones. Ethan asked her, "What is that?" She replied, "My name." Ethan was confused. "Your real name?" She nodded. "It's not Leary, it's Liranev House Vale." Ethan blinked, unsure what that meant. She continued, "I was born on Uvex, a royal moon, but I don't remember much." Leary touched her temple, as if trying to pull memories from her head. "I was taken," she said slowly, "put in the pod by someone. Maybe my mother." "Why?" Ethan asked. She looked up at him, her eyes glowing slightly. "To protect me." Ethan sat beside her, unsure what to say. He felt like he was part of something bigger than he could understand. He had only wanted to help a lost girl. Now he realized she was far more than that. Later that day, a black drone hovered near the treetops. It made no sound but spun slowly, scanning the area. Ethan spotted it through the window, his heart racing. He rushed outside with a slingshot and a magnetic pulse rock, one of the few alien tools he had. With one shot, the drone sparked and dropped from the sky. Leary watched from the window, silent but wide-eyed. She whispered to herself, "There." Searching close now. That night, Ethan showed her old Earth cartoons to cheer her up. They laughed at silly animals, ate warm soup, and sat near the fire like nothing was wrong. But both of them felt it, something in the air. The peace they had was temporary. Before going to bed, Leary looked up at Ethan and asked, "Can I still be human?" Ethan knelt down, touched her shoulder, and smiled. "You already are," he said. But as he turned off the lights and walked to his room, he didn't notice the shadow moving past the trees outside. Something or someone was getting closer. Leary sat on the floor of the cabin, eyes closed, her hands resting gently on her knees. She wasn't sleeping, and she wasn't awake either. Ethan watched her from the doorway, wondering if this was normal for her kind. She had been doing this every morning for 3 days now, still and silent, like she was listening to something far away. When he asked her about it, she only said, "I'm remembering." But remembering what? She never explained. Ethan had questions too many to count. What was she really? Where did she come from? Who was hunting her? And why could she do things no human child ever could? He tried not to pressure her. She had been through enough, but deep inside, Ethan knew the truth. Something inside her was waking up, and it scared him, even though he didn't want to admit it. That afternoon, Ethan took a blood sample from Leary while she was sleeping. He didn't want to do it, but he had to know more. He used an old analysis kit he had from his time in the Galactic Corps. It took only a few minutes. But when the screen lit up with results, his heart skipped a beat. Unknown genetic sequence. The device said, not registered in any known star system. Bioenergy levels unstable. Ethan stared at the blinking screen. It was impossible. She wasn't just an alien child, she was something new, something ancient, or maybe both. Suddenly, the device flickered, buzzed, and shut down. Leary stood at the doorway, awake now, her eyes glowing softly. "You were testing me," she said. In a quiet voice, Ethan stood quickly, surprised she knew what he had done. "I had to," he replied. "I just wanted to help." Leary didn't look angry, only sad. "I don't want to be tested," she said. "I want to be normal." "I know," Ethan said gently. "But you're not, Leary. You're something special." She turned away, walked to the window, and stared into the trees. "The others called me cursed," she whispered. "They said I should have never been born." Ethan stepped beside her, shocked. "Who said that?" She shook her head. "The ones before the crash, before the pod. I think they were afraid of me." That night, the weather turned cold. Ethan lit a fire, and Leary sat close to it, wrapped in a blanket. She opened her hand and showed Ethan. A small crystal smooth, glowing faintly blue. "I found it in the forest," she said. "But it feels like it's part of me." Ethan took it gently, studying it. The moment he touched it, images flashed in his mind. Fire, stars, battle cries, voices speaking a language he didn't understand. He dropped the crystal, gasping for breath. "What was that?" he asked. Leary looked afraid. "It's called a memory stone," she said. "It stores feelings and thoughts, but only for those who are connected." "Connected to what?" Ethan asked. She looked up at him and said, "To me." Ethan sat down slowly, trying to take it all in. She wasn't just carrying memories, she was made of them. Or maybe the memories were part of her. Creation, either way. She was more than a lost child. She was a living secret. Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He walked outside, breathing in the cool air. The stars above were quiet, but something in the forest wasn't. He heard a low hum, almost like a whisper in the trees. He followed the sound with a flashlight, keeping his steps quiet. Near the edge of the woods, he saw it, a strange device stuck into the ground, blinking red. It wasn't his, and it wasn't human. He picked it up, and it buzzed in his hand when he returned to the cabin. Leary was standing at the door, wide awake. "You touched their beacon," she said. Ethan looked at her, confused. "They'll know where we are now," she added. He realized then, they were already being tracked. Every moment, every signal was like a flare in the dark. Someone out there was looking for Leary, and now they were getting closer. "Why do they want you?" Ethan asked. Leary didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Because I wasn't supposed to survive. I carry the blood of two houses that were enemies in the war. I was born from peace, but they see me as a threat." Ethan couldn't believe it. She wasn't just a child, she was a symbol. A child of two alien bloodlines. Both powerful, both dangerous, and now she was in his care. The fire in the cabin crackled as Leary placed the crystal near the flames. It glowed brighter, like it was alive. She looked at Ethan with serious eyes and said, "If they come, don't let them take me." Ethan nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I won't," he promised, no matter what came from the stars above. He was ready to fight for her, even if it meant war. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat near the window with a thermal blanket around his shoulders and an old plasma pistol on the table beside him. Leary was finally resting, curled up on the couch, holding the glowing memory crystal close to her chest. Outside, the wind was still, too still, like the forest was holding its breath. He had dealt with strange things during his time in the galactic cores. Hostile creatures, corrupt commanders, even dark science experiments. But never something like this, a child carrying the blood of two warring alien empires. The beacon he found was silent now, but he knew it had already sent a signal. He just didn't know who had received it, or how soon they'd arrive at dawn. He stepped outside and checked the perimeter. The jammers were still working, The shields around the cabin were holding, but the forest felt wrong. Birds weren't singing, and the air had a strange metallic taste. He spotted something in the sky, barely visible, a blinking point of light that didn't move. It wasn't a star, and it wasn't a satellite. It was watching, back inside. Leary had woken up and was staring out the window. "They're here," she said quietly. "Above us," Ethan nodded. "I saw the ship too." She shook her head. "Not just one." Her voice was small, but her words were heavy. "There are 3 of them." Ethan didn't ask how she knew. By now he had accepted that her abilities were far beyond human. She could sense things no machine could detect. He set up the emergency scanner, one that could pick up cloaked ships and alien frequencies. It lit up immediately 3 unidentified signatures, holding position in the upper atmosphere. They weren't coming down. Not yet. They were waiting. Leary sat at the table, drawing again. This time she wasn't sketching symbols or stars. She was drawing faces, strange, regal faces with sharp features and piercing eyes. "These are the council," she said. "They're the ones who decided I should be erased." Ethan frowned. "They're sending someone, aren't they?" She nodded. "An observer, to confirm I'm alive. Then they'll send more." That afternoon, a cold wind moved through the trees. The sky darkened suddenly, though there were no clouds. It was like a shadow had passed over the sun. Ethan grabbed his scanner again, a new signal closer this time. And moving fast, a sleek pod landed silently in the middle of the forest. A few hundred meters from the cabin. It didn't crash. It didn't burn. It arrived like it belonged there, silent and smooth. Ethan and Leary watched from the cabin roof. Hidden beneath camo netting, a figure stepped out of the pod, tall and slim, wearing a dark cloak that shimmered with every movement. They looked around slowly, scanning the area without using any tools. Their eyes glowed softly pale green. "That's not a soldier," Leary whispered. "No?" Ethan asked. She shook her head. "It's a seer." Ethan knew the word. Seers were rare. Powerful beings who could read minds, sense energy, and track memories through time. They didn't speak often, but when they did, entire fleets obeyed. Seer knelt down, placed one hand on the ground, and closed their eyes. The air around them shimmered like heat waves, even though it was cold. Ethan felt his vision blur slightly, like something was reaching into his thoughts. He backed away. Clutching the side of the cabin, Leary grabbed his arm and whispered, "They're searching me through you. Don't think about me." Ethan tried to clear his mind, but it was too late. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and the seer opened their eyes. They had found something. The seer stood and began walking toward the cabin, not rushing, not hiding, confident, calm. And sure of their direction, Ethan activated the defense field, surrounding the cabin with an invisible energy dome. He pulled Leary inside and locked every door. "We're not ready for this," he muttered. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Leary said, "But if they try to take me, I will stop them." Ethan placed his hand on her shoulder. "Not alone," he said. "If we fight, we fight together." Suddenly, the ground near the cabin shifted. A large rock lifted into the air by itself, then dropped. A voice echoed through the forest, not loud, but clear. "I know she's here," it said. "Let me see her." Ethan stepped outside, weapon in hand. The seer stood just beyond the tree line, hands empty, face calm. "I'm not here to kill," they said. "I'm here to witness." Leary stepped out behind Ethan, her glowing eyes locked onto the seer's. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the seer whispered, "You are the child of peace." "I am," Leary replied. "You weren't supposed to survive." "I did," the seer nodded slowly. "Then everything is about to change." And without another word, they turned and walked back toward the pod, vanishing into the trees. Ethan looked at Leary, who stared at the empty path. "What does that mean?" he asked. She whispered, "It means my mother will come next." The morning after the seer vanished, the air around Ethan's cabin felt heavier. Not dangerous, but different. Leary stood on the porch in silence, her eyes fixed on the forest beyond. She wasn't blinking, barely breathing like she was, waiting for something she already knew would happen. Ethan walked out with 2 mugs of warm tea. She didn't look at him, just said, "She's near." "Who?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "My mother," Leary whispered. "Velma." That name echoed in Ethan's mind like a bell. He had heard it before, in the memory crystal, in Leary's dreams, in her frightened whispers. But now it was real, before Ethan could respond. The ground trembled softly, a low hum vibrated through the air, like a soft pulse traveling through the earth. Then, without warning, a light descended from the sky, a soft gold beam that touched the clearing just beyond the trees. From that light stepped a tall figure, elegant and powerful. Her skin shimmered like polished silver, and her long cloak flowed behind her like liquid metal. Eyes the same as Leary's, bright, glowing, filled with stars. She walked without fear, without hurry. Ethan reached for his plasma pistol, but Leary grabbed his wrist gently. "No," she said. "She won't hurt us." The woman stopped a few meters away, her gaze resting on Leary. Then she smiled, a small, controlled smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "My daughter," she said, her voice soft but filled with weight. "You survived." Leary stepped forward, uncertain. "You left me," she said, her voice shaking. Velma nodded. "To save you. I was hunted by the high houses," she continued. "I had no choice but to hide you on this planet." Ethan stepped beside Leary, watching the alien woman carefully. "You could have come sooner," he said. Velma turned to him and studied his face. "You are the human who raised her," she said. "You gave her shelter, food, safety." "I gave her love," Ethan replied firmly. That made Velma pause. For a second, the noble expression on her face cracked, just slightly. "She has changed," she said softly. "More to herself than to anyone else. She has learned human ways." Leary stepped back, unsure of how to feel. Ethan was the only parent she had known. But this woman, this alien queen, was the one who had given her life. Velma looked around the cabin and said, "This world is simple, primitive. But you have done well, Ethan." Ethan didn't like her tone. She spoke like someone who expected obedience, not respect. He folded his arms. "Are you here to take her?" Velma turned toward Leary, her expression softening. "I came to offer her the truth," she said, "and to ask for a place beside her, not as a ruler, not as a commander, but as her mother." Leary looked between them, her heart torn. She loved Ethan deeply, his kindness, his calm voice, the way he never asked her to be anything other than herself. But she also felt something strange in Velma's presence, a connection that stirred her blood, her memory, her ancient identity. "I want both," she said quietly. Velma raised an eyebrow. "Both?" "I want my human father and my alien mother," Leary replied. "I don't want to choose." Silence filled the space between them. Ethan didn't say anything, waiting for Velma's answer. The woman looked at Leary with eyes full of something. Unreadable pride, sorrow, fear, and hope all mixed together. Finally she nodded. "Very well," she said. "We will stay together." That night, the cabin was quiet. Velma sat by the fire, staring at the flames like they were old friends. Ethan sat across from her, cleaning a tool in silence. Leary was asleep upstairs, the memory crystal glowing softly in her hands. After a long pause, Velma spoke. "She is more powerful than you realize." Ethan looked up. "I've seen glimpses." "She was born of 2 rival bloodlines," Velma said. "Her very existence is forbidden by the old laws, but she was not an accident. She was a promise." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "A promise of what?" Velma stared into the fire, of peace. But before Ethan could respond, an alarm on the old scanner buzzed to life. Ethan jumped up, checking the screen. A ship had entered the lower orbit, large, heavily armed, and marked with the crest of the high houses. "They followed me," Velma whispered. "They've come to take her." Ethan looked up the stairs where Leary slept. not with fear, but with fire in his eyes. Then they'll have to go through me, he said. Velma stood tall, her cloak shimmering. And me, she added. The family, human and alien, was now complete. But they were no longer hiding, they were preparing for war. The warning lights blinked red across Ethan's cabin. The scanner buzzed with a low hum, showing the massive alien warship now hovering in the upper sky. Leary stared at the display in silence while Velma stood beside her, cloak flowing like a shadow in the firelight. Ethan shut the doors and sealed the windows, preparing for whatever was about to come. They're scanning the surface, Velma said calmly. They will detect me first, then her. Ethan turned to her. Can they beam her out from a distance? Velma shook her head. Not without her consent. She has royal blood, her mind must allow the connection. Leary looked at Ethan, then her mother. But what if I don't want to go? She asked. Velma's face softened. Then they will send someone to change your mind. Ethan placed a hand on Leary's shoulder. You don't owe them anything, he said firmly. You're not just their future, he added. You're yours. Later that evening, Velma activated a protective shield over the cabin. She placed ancient stones in the ground, humming with silent energy. Leary watched as patterns lit up in the soil like starlight, forming a dome above the house. Ethan helped too, placing his old core's gear around the perimeter, including EMP traps and sonic field disruptors. You've done this before, Velma said, watching him. And Finn nodded. Long ago. I was tired of fighting, he said. But for her, I'll do it again. They stood together outside as the stars flickered strangely in the sky. Then, without sound, a small pod detached from the warship and began descending. It looked almost like the one Leary had crashed in, but this one was sleek, armored, and alive with energy. It landed without noise, the trees barely shaking. The door opened, and from it stepped a man, tall, muscular, and wearing robes lined with silver and black. His skin was bronze, and his eyes glowed bright violet. He looked directly at Leary, as if he had known her his whole life. Velma tensed. High Advisor Taziel, she whispered. Ethan reached for his weapon, but Velma raised a hand. He's not here to kill, she said. Not yet. Taziel stepped forward, stopping just short of the shield. You broke the ancient pact, he said to Velma. You had a child with the enemy. You hid her on a forbidden world. And now you let her be raised by him, he added, nodding toward Ethan with disdain. Ethan stepped forward. I saved her life, he said coldly. I raised her when no one else would. She's not just your blood, she's her own person. Taziel's eyes narrowed. And yet, she is the last key to unite the warring houses. She belongs with us. Leary stepped between them, voice steady but soft. I don't belong to anyone, she said. I was born from both your worlds, but I choose mine. Taziel raised a brow, surprised. You choose Earth? This planet of dirt and storms? You choose this man? Leary nodded. He gave me something none of you did, she said. A name. Silence followed, the air tense. Taziel looked to Velma. Then we will return with a council force. She cannot be allowed to decide for herself. Velma stepped forward, her voice low and dangerous. If you return with war, we will meet you with war. This girl is not your tool. Taziel stared at her, then at Ethan. You were once a soldier, he said. You know how this ends. Ethan met his gaze. Maybe, he replied. But maybe this time we change how it ends. Taziel stepped back, turned toward his pod, and paused. To her, you may be a father, he said, but you are not her origin. Ethan replied, maybe not, but I am her choice. The pod lifted silently, vanishing into the sky. The tension remained, but the first strike hadn't come, yet everyone knew it would that night. The cabin was quiet again, but the peace felt borrowed. Leary sat between Ethan and Velma by the fire, holding both their hands. Do I have to become a leader? She asked suddenly. Velma looked at her, then at Ethan. You can be whatever you want, Ethan said gently. But whatever you become, you won't face it alone. Velma nodded slowly. For the first time in our history, she said, a child was born from both ends of the war, and for the first time, two worlds are watching her, not as an enemy, but as a chance. But I don't want to be a symbol, Leary said. Ethan smiled. Then be a daughter. And for the first time since her arrival on Earth, Leary closed her eyes that night and truly slept. Not as a lost alien, not as a hidden heir, but as a child, safe between two who chose to love her. The morning sky was too bright for comfort. It wasn't the sun, it was something above it. The great warship belonging to the high houses now hovered lower, casting a soft golden shadow over the forest. Its engines hummed with power, silent to the ear but heavy on the chest. Ethan stood outside the cabin, gear ready, shield lines glowing in the ground beneath his feet. Beside him stood Velma, dressed in armor made from memory steel light, smooth and ancient, and behind them, stepping carefully but with growing courage, was Leary. She was no longer hiding. Her small hands glowed faintly, the memory crystal now floating beside her like a guardian spirit. She looked up at the sky without fear. They're coming down, Velma said, her voice like thunder waiting to rise. They want her to bow. Ethan clenched his fists. Then let them see she stands. A new pod descended slowly, larger than before, carrying 5 armored soldiers and 1 cloaked figure in front. As they landed in the clearing, the energy from their boots scorched the grass. The cloaked figure stepped forward, removing their hood to reveal an old face wrinkled but strong, with golden eyes full of power. The Grand Judge, Velma whispered. Final voice of the High Council. The judge raised his hand and the soldiers stood still. He looked directly at Leary and spoke. You carry the blood of 2 broken houses. You are not meant to exist, but your presence has awakened something we cannot ignore. Leary didn't speak, just watched. Listening. You are a choice, the judge said. You can come with us, take your place, and we will stop the war. Or you stay here, and we erase you. Ethan stepped forward, fury in his eyes. You'll have to go through us first. Velma's armor began to glow, ready for combat. The judge nodded slightly, then looked at Leary again. Or, he said, you can speak now and decide for yourself. The forest grew silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Waiting, all eyes were on Leary. She stepped forward, past Ethan, past her mother, and stood before the judge alone. Her voice was clear, stronger than ever before. I was born from 2 enemies, she said, but I was raised in love. She turned toward Ethan. This man gave me safety when I had nothing. She looked at Velma. This woman gave me truth when I had questions. Then she looked at the soldiers, the ship, the sky. You want me to lead your peace, she said. But peace forced is not peace at all. If I'm to be a bridge, I choose where I stand. She lifted the crystal into the air, and it began to glow brighter and brighter. Her voice echoed with power. I am not the past. I am not the war. I am Leary. And I choose Earth. A shockwave of energy exploded from her body, not violent, not destructive, but warm, like a memory shared between billions of hearts. The soldiers dropped their weapons. Stunned, the judge blinked slowly, for the first time. The council felt powerless before a child. After a long silence, he bowed his head. You have made your choice, he said. We will honor it. The pod lifted again, this time with no threat, no anger, only silence. And the great warship vanished into the sky, leaving the earth untouched. Ethan let out a long breath, tears in his eyes. Velma turned to her daughter, pride and peace finally in her face. That night, they didn't lock the doors. They didn't scan the sky. They simply sat around the fire, together like a family. Leary laughed as Ethan told her old Earth jokes. Velma showed her how to weave light threads into glowing art. They were no longer a secret. They were a symbol, yes, but more than that, they were whole. Days passed, then weeks. No one came to take her. No council returned. But messages arrived. carefully and respectfully requests for Leary's voice in peace talks across star systems. And Leary answered every message the same way. "I'll speak," she said, "but only if I bring my father." Ethan chuckled the first time he heard her say it. "I'm no politician," he said. Leary smiled. "You don't have to be. You're my home." The cabin stayed the same wooden walls, warm fire and quiet forest, but inside, a star was growing, not the kind that burned or exploded, but one that healed, and though many across the galaxy never saw it with their own eyes, they felt it. They called her the girl who chose Earth, but to Ethan and Velma, she was simply Leary, their daughter, their bridge, their future.